to take some of the things we've learned about running rubocop over our Ruby code bases to find odd syntax and non-idiomatic code. And we're going to write some YAML config to have a GitHub action run against our repository on a push, which is normally done when you submit a pull request, to run rubocop over our code on GitHub and present the output in quite a nice fashion. To do this, we're going to use one of our existing public code bases, public explicit class higher up. Long name, and it's too early. So we're going to clone this repository, and we're going to cd into it. We're going to set the Ruby version that we want to test under, which is 250, same as most of my code, and then we're going to install the gem bundle dependencies. So we can have this. Now to start with, we'll just make sure that we actually have some rubocop violations to work with later. Bundle except rubocop, and this is a very old code base, so I'm expecting quite a few. Yes, 33 exceptions, that's good, because we'll have plenty of output to work through. So we'll create a new branch, and we'll call that branch add GitHub Action. And even when you're working on your own code, it's often helpful to work in a branch so you can actually compare what you're doing against what's already there, run through the normal pull request system and actually have nicer diffs. So in order to add a GitHub action, we need to create a directory at the root of our repository called GitHub. And the code to actually configure the action and the jobs themselves is called workers. So GitHub workers, and then you can call the files in this anything you want. Sorry, not workers, it's GitHub workflows. So GitHub workflows, and we can call the files anything we want to in there, and we'll call this one rubocop linter.yaml. And in this file, we want to give it a name so we know we can see it running. We'll call it rubocop linter, and then we'll say on push, but not when we have these branches. So on push, but branches ignore, and then we're going to tell it to ignore the master branch, which is Git's default branch, and we're going to tell it to ignore the main branch, which is becoming a more commonly used default branch name. And so we don't want these to run against pushes to the main branch, because by that point we should have already submitted a pull request in a branch, run the reviews on that, and this is just an informal merge step. We don't want to run all the commands twice. So on branch is on branch push, apart from those two. We want the jobs to run, and we want to lint, which is just the name we're going to call it. We need to tell it what container to run these things in. So that'll be runs on. And GitHub sticks to Ubuntu long-term supported release. So Ubuntu 18.04, which is not the newest long-term support release, but it's pretty stable and it's in use in a few places. And then we're going to tell it what steps we want. And the steps we want to run are, first of all, we need to pull down the actual code from our repository so we can run anything else over it. And we do that using an action called checkout code. Name uses, and we specify that by saying action slash checkout, and we're going to tell it to use version 2 of this, which is the current default version. And then we're going to add another step after that to run rubocop over our code. And this is a third-party GitHub action that's been written by someone called Andrew. It's quite nice. It presents the output in a very friendly way, and it doesn't require much configuration to work nicely. So we'll call this step rubocop linter, and these are all freeform. The names are freeform text fields, so you can call them whatever makes sense to you in your context. And we're going to tell it to use actions, and it is Andrew M codes. Andrew, no, it's not actions. Actions is the name specifier for GitHub ones. Andrew M codes is the specifier for this person's third-party one. So it uses Andrew M codes. Rubocop linter action, and when I did this a couple of weeks ago it was 3.2.0, so we'll stick to that one because I know it works and it won't do anything strange, hopefully. And then we're going to pass in a single environment variable, and when we run this action we want the action to run rubocop over our code base and then post the results back. And in order to post the results back to our build, it needs to have some access to the build, and we, instead of having manually specified hard-coded passwords, GitHub provides a token you can use within your own workflows that you can use to talk to your own account. with no actual explicit passwords being available to you, so it's a lot less likely you can leak them. So GitHub_token, and then we use the templating language to access the internal token, and that's stored under secrets. I think GitHub token, GitHub. So what I am learning is I'm better at typing these things in the evening than I'm in the morning, which is interesting. I'm in the UK and it's currently 7:30 because my alarm went off slightly too early today. So GitHub token, and that should be enough to get us running our first job. So double check we're on a branch, which we are. We can see what's been changed, which is just the addition of that job. So we'll go git add GitHub what's happened there? GitHub workflows. We've got that is the correct thing. So we'll git add that. Then we'll commit. We'll go to GitHub Action, and then we'll push that up to our repository that you can see on the left. And as you can see, there's currently no .github directory, and there are no active actions. There are ways of adding them via the UI, but as it's source code and we're using version control anyway, we might as well do the whole thing in a version controlled way so we can reproduce it, reuse it, and keep tracks of our changes. So we'll push this up. And then we'll use the lovely hub command to look at what we're sending so we can raise a pull request. And the only change to this is we're adding a GitHub workflows rubocop.linter file. And that's the contents that we just typed in. There's the name. On a push, unless it's those branches, check out the code and run rubocop across it. So create the pull request. And I normally have a version, I normally have a SAS. There is an issue. So what is the issue in my rubocop code? And it's failed. Why has it failed? Rubocop linter action. So I've put in the wrong name somewhere. So let's go back to our code and GitHub workflow rubocop linter. And which ones it says missing? Andrew M codes is wrong. Rubocop linter action. And actually could not be found at the URL Andrew M codes rubocop linter action 320. So Andrew M code / rubocop linter action. So we're just going to double check that this is still a valid version, which would be amazing if this is the moment that it doesn't work anymore. We scroll down to the usage statement, and that line there we're missing a V to specify the version. That's the difference. Okay, so we'll modify that. We'll add the V in, and then in order to make this look like one single commit and never show anyone else that we had a problem, we're going to add the change we want to make, which is just that one character. And then we're going to do commit amend, and in this you'll see that that one character change is in the same commit. We've added the new GitHub action, so it's the same description on the commit. The commit in general is all the contents is the first commit plus the one little fix, but we're going to push that up GitHub git push -f origin, and the branch name is add GitHub action. And the -f origin tells it to overwrite the branch on the origin on GitHub itself. And if we run this, no one will ever know that we did two commits. They'll only ever see the finished commit. So it'll look like we got it right perfectly. And the only people who know I got it wrong are you and us. And as none of you are watching, it's probably just me. So then if we go back to pull requests, we can see the checks are running again now. And in the actual code difference, there is a single commit, and it includes the character that we mistyped. So hopefully now this will continue running. So rubocop linter, and here you can see it's setting up the job. So the operating system is the one we specified. It's the Ubuntu 18.4 release, which we can show here. So that matches across there. It's checking out the code using the checkout action that we configured here, and then it's running the rubocop linter. installing dependencies like we did on the local machine, running, and the job is complete. And what you'll note is that the build actually failed. So if we go back to the checks page, actually we'll go back to the conversation so we can see both. The spec test on Travis is still running. The job successfully executed, but the rubocop part failed to build because there are violations. And here you can see the quite nice interface showing all the violations. So, a common friend, missing frozen string literal. So we're going to do two things. We're going to fix one of these issues up, probably the frozen string ones, to show that it's working. And we're also going to make sure that a failing rubocop violation does not fail the build, because we've got our code base. We'll do improvements gradually, and the spec tests are the important part for us at this stage. So we'll go back, pull the changes down that we've pushed into master so we know our branch is okay. Sorry, let's first of all let's actually merge the change. So we've merged the pull request, go merge. So we've enabled the GitHub rubocop action, but at the moment the builds will fail. So if we pull the changes down, and then we'll check out a new branch, allow violations, and in order to do this we need to set up a config entry for the GitHub Actions rubocop, the GitHub rubocop action, and we put that under GitHub, but it's actually, sorry, trying to think what the directory is. It's GitHub and it's config, not configs. It's pluralized workflows, singular config, which always catches me. So GitHub config, that is correct. And this file name is important because it's where the action will look for the config by default. And this needs to be set to rubocop _linter _action.yaml. And in here we're going to set a single detail. We're going to go rubocop fail level, and we're going to set that to be fatal. And as you may have noticed in the rubocop output, not fatal, as you may have noticed in the rubocop output, you get notifications, you get warnings, and you get errors. By setting the fail level to fatal, you're telling rubocop to only fail the build if it is unable to pass the code, which means either one of the checks is incorrect or more likely that your code isn't running properly and actually compiling. So we'll set that to there. We'll add that file in, and then we'll add a rubocop. We'll run rubocop to capture the violations, and then the empty frozen string literal comment we'll add into a default rubocop file, rubocop.yaml. We'll set this to be enabled false. We'll add that to our commit. So that we will no longer see those violations. We add the config we've already added. We add the config that we've created the file for. So add find without failing the build, and then we'll push those to our new branch. We'll then double check our diff to make sure we've only included the things we think we have, which is adding the config for rubocop and allowing rubocop to find violations. We'll create the pull request, and then we should see the checks running. And if this change is successful, this should run, find violations, but still go green, which is sort of what we want at the moment, because in our older code base, you're not going to fix all the rubocop violations on the same go through. All you want to do is ensure that the code doesn't get any worse. So here we can see it running the violator again. And what's interesting is when you run it this time in the morning in my time zone, the GitHub runners are very quick. There's no waiting around for them to happen, because most of the Americans aren't working at the moment. There's a lot more capacity available. And here you'll see that we've got a green tick, so even though we still have violations, the build has not failed. And you can also see the number has dropped because we no longer have the frozen string rubocop warning appearing. So we go back to the pull request. We can expand the checks and see that the rubocop linter is happy. Continuous integration tests on Travis are happy. We can merge this pull request, and we now have automatic rubocop checks running against every pull request sent to this repository, with no infrastructure on our side and just 2 config files to configure exactly how we want it to run. So thank you for your time, and hopefully this has been helpful.